It's good day to brew, baby. What is up, YouTube? It's your boy Millsy, back at the Hometown Commander, back for another episode of Millsy Brews, the show where I brew my version 1.0 deck list of the Commander in front of us on my quest to outbrew a Magic world. This week we are officially starting Outlaws of Thunder Junction. I am so excited. The set looks like a ton of fun. There's a ton of really cool commanders to come in the next few weeks. Some older commanders I wanted to give a go with the new set. All that is coming, but this week is Precon week, and we're starting off with Yuma, Proud Protector, the face commander of the Desert Bloom Precon. An 8-mana 6/6 human ranger. It says the first spell costs one less. This spell costs one less to cast for each land card in our graveyard. When Yuma ETBs or attacks, we can sacrifice a land. If we do, draw a card. And when a desert is put into our graveyard from anywhere, we make a 4/2 plant warrior creature token with reach. Yuma, I think, is a lot of fun in a lot of ways. We're a landfall commander, in a sense, right? We want to make sure these desert cards, these desert lands aren't going to our graveyard, and we're in colors where we can get them back through a lot of ways. But we're really going to try to use the desert to our advantage, make some tokens, and move into the game. So our goals, we're going to either get deserts into our graveyard with Yuma's ability to sacrifice them, or by discarding them or any other means. We're going to play a bunch of other Landfall Payoffs to make tokens and do what Landfall decks are really good at. We're going to talk about ways we can get deserts back from our graveyard, so we can do this again and again with Yuma. And then talk about how we're going to push forward to end the game. What I really like about Yuma's last ability is it isn't limited to once per turn, which means we're really wanting to take advantage of trying to do deserts multiple times to the graveyard and back, if we can, in order to get multiple tokens per turn. As always, the deck list is going to be down in the description for you below. But about getting deserts into our graveyard, there's a lot of ways we can do this. Dune Chanter is one of the new cards that says that lands we control, land cards we own that aren't on the battlefield are deserts in addition to their other types. This is really cool, but again, whether we use its ability to mill 2 cards or we're discarding other land cards, they're going to be deserts and activate Yuma's ability, whereas they wouldn't otherwise. Elvish Reclaimer lets us pay 2, tap it, and sack a land to go get a land of our choice and put it on the battlefield tapped. This is really great because we can sack a desert and go get another land we need, or just go get another desert. Scapeshift allows us to sacrifice any number of lands, get that many from our library in the battlefield tapped. Again, we can sack all of our deserts, put them in the graveyard, and in a second we're going to talk about ways we can play the lands back out of the graveyard, but that can activate Yuma's ability and get us a lot of value. Nahiri's Lithoforming, sack X lands. For each land card, sacrifice this way, draw a card. We can play X additional lands this turn, and lands you control enter the battlefield tapped. Here's a way to sacrifice a couple lands, draw an extra cards, play some extra lands, but mainly those ones going to the graveyard hopefully are triggering Yuma's ability, or these life, these landfall triggers are triggering our other abilities. Life from the Loam allows us to dredge 3, so instead of drawing, we can mill 3 and bring Life from the Loam back to our hand. And what's really cool is in the process of that milling, if we mill deserts, it's going to trigger Yuma. And then Life from the Loam will let us bring those lands back to our hand in order to either play them and sacrifice them, discard them, whatever. Life from the Loam is one of these cards that if you're playing this graveyard land strategy with other commanders like Gitrog, this is the kind of card that tends to be something you really want to see and take advantage of multiple times over game. Crop Rotation, we sacrifice a land, go get one land of our choice from our deck and put it on the battlefield. Again, sack a desert, go get a desert, sack a desert, go get a Triome or something like that. But again, a desert can hit the graveyard that way with that ability. Zuran Orb's a really fun one if we have a ways to play those the lands back out of our graveyard. We can sack a land to gain 2 life and then play it back out of our graveyard, specifically hoping to do that with a desert so that we can get the token off of Yuma, but then still get that desert back. And then we have things like Roiling Regrowth and Harrow, which will allow us to sack a land and go get 2 basic lands from our deck. But again, the hope there is we sack a desert, get the token, and then get the basic lands, and then try to get that desert back out of the graveyard. But we don't want Yuma to be the only landfall trigger we're trying to trigger here, because or a esque type trigger. We really want to be doing other things, and thankfully in these colors we have so many creatures that have landfall triggers that are really great. Vendor of Zendikar comes in and gives us a plant for each land we control, and whenever a land comes in, we put a counter into our plants. Vendor of Zendikar can end the game very quickly if left unchecked, because those plants can get really big. Rampaging Baloths can make us a 4/4 every time a land comes in. Green Sleeves makes us a 3/3 Badger whenever a land comes in, and packs a big body, being a star, where star is the number of lands we control. We have Omnath, Locus of Rage, making a 5/5 Elemental every time a land comes in, and then dealing 3 damage when one of those elementals dies. Oboon is kind of a fun trigger, where beginning of combat on our turn, we can have one land become an XX Elemental with Trample, where X is Oboon's power. And then whenever a land comes in, we can put a counter on Oboon or another creature. But again, this just allows us to make one of our lands into a big creature instead of dealing damage that way. Bristly Bill looks kind of cool from the new set. Whenever a land comes in, we put a counter on target creature. And for 5 mana, we can just start doubling the counters on all of our creatures. Again, we're going to pair this with some of our trample or combat type effects we're going to talk about later. And Bristly Bill could be a way for us to set up a really good board stable. Let's start with getting our lands back. One of the ways to do this is probably one of the other most popular desert commanders, because he was really the only one in his Azen Shaper of the Sand. Says we can play lands from our graveyard, and then whenever a desert comes in, we make 2 1/1 red, white, and green Sand Warrior creature tokens. His Azen works really well with Yuma, pairs well together, making those tokens and getting them back out of the graveyard. Remnant Excavator, of course, we can just play lands from our graveyard. Ancient Green Warden kind of plays double in our deck. Lets us play those lands from the graveyard, but also doubles the trigger anytime a land comes in. And that's pretty great, because then we're getting double the triggers on all these other creatures. Conduit of Worlds is going to let us play lands from our graveyard, and then we can tap it to play a non-land permanent from our graveyard, but that's the only thing we can do this turn. And then Perennial Behemoth lets us just play lands from our graveyard. I am not playing the Crucible of Worlds just because of the cost. I think Conduit of Worlds works perfectly, especially with all these other lands from the graveyard type effects we need. I don't think we need the Crucible of Worlds. I think Conduit of Worlds just works perfectly fine for us with all these other effects that we have. But we talked about how to get deserts into our graveyard. We talked about how to get them back. We talked about the landfall triggers. Well, how are we going to end this thing? First off, we have Rumbleweed, one of the new cards. I love the look of this one. 1 less to cast for each land in your graveyard. Vigilance, Reach, Trample. And when it comes in, other creatures get +3/+3 and trample till end of turn. The wider the board is, the better this is. This is our kind of mini Crater Hoof we get in the deck. Mirage Fury of Akum is probably going to be one of my favorite ways to end the game. It says each creature you control gets +1/+0 for each time it attacked this turn. And when a land comes in, if it's your main phase, you get an additional combat after this one. If we can plan our turn out well, we can get multiple combats and multiple main phases and start really hitting our opponents. Feldar Retreat has 2 really fun abilities. The first is that Landfall Token ability, but the second is putting a counter on each creature we control and giving them Vigilance so they can take a big attack and potentially block as well. Both Rising of the Day and Roar Resistance are going to give all of our creature tokens haste, meaning if we have a big turn where we play multiple lands and get multiple tokens, we're allowing those to attack that same turn. Roar Resistance lets us play 1 in a red to give all of our creatures +2/+0 when they're attacking, which can be a really fun thing itself. And then I threw in Great Train Heist here, a new card, because I think it's kind of interesting. For 1 red and then 2 in a red, we can untap all creatures and get an extra combat. For that red +2, we can get +1/+0 in First Strike. And then for this 2 red, we can choose an opponent. Whenever one of our creatures deals damage to that player this turn, we create a tap treasure token. I like all 3 of the abilities. 2 of them are pretty combat heavy. One of them, if we can get a big attack in at somebody. Of course, we're having Trample Enablers in the deck like Garruk's Uprising as well. But I think some of these are interesting and they're going to allow us to push towards combat and help us end the game. But I've said it before on the channel, and I'll always say it. No deck is ever complete, and especially when we're brewing 1.0 versions of these decks, there's always going to be cards we missed, cards we wanted to add, cards we might want to come back on later. And for my brew, these are the three cards I think if you're going to try out this deck and you're going to try to use my list or some variation of my list, these are the 3 that I would consider. The first is War Leader's Call there on the right. We're going to be making enough tokens, I think, on our landfall triggers that War Leader's Call will be really worth it. I didn't put it in. I tried to stick to more landfall, really go wide, really take advantage of it, but I think War Leader's Call could be very well deserved And then the pair of Titania and Argoth. Titania says whenever one or more lands are put into your graveyard from anywhere, you gain 2 life. And then at the beginning of your turn, if there are 4 more lands in your graveyard, we can flip it and Argoth into Titania, Gaia Incarnate, a really powerful creature on the backside. Argoth actually helps us with milling cards and making a bear, just hopefully getting us more lands into the graveyard. If you like that idea, trying to get these 2 at the same time and then trying to meld them into the back, that could be really fun. I'm sure some people will want that, some people won't, but I thought it would be fun to kind of potentially put that in here as an idea. But let's get into our playtests and see what we can do with this deck. Keeping a 4-lander with an Exploration, a Feldar Retreat, and a Soul Ring seems really good. Yuma is 8 mana, a very expensive commander, so we need to work our way up there. Turn 1, we draw a Broker's Hideout, which is pretty cool. That will actually get us a land in the graveyard for Yuma's ability, and unless we're really wanting to play Soul Ring this turn, I'm kind of thinking about playing that Broker's Hideout. When it comes in, we sacrifice it. When we do, we search our library for a basic, for a forest, plains, or island. Now, of course, we're not going to have any islands in our deck, but we certainly have a forest, which is what I think I'm going to go for. You know, you could argue I could go for a plains, because I have 2 green sources in my hand. I think that might be the better option. Let's go for a plains. I got 2 green sources in my hand, 1 red, 1 white. Let's just go for that plains there to kind of even it all out. And I can do that, remember, because Broker's Hideout lets me do that. Close and shuffle, and that gained us a life through the process, which is pretty darn cool. Turn 2, we're going to play that basic forest in our hand. We could play the Hashep Oasis, but you know, no reason to at the moment. We're going to use that white mana to play Soul Ring, and then we'll use that green mana to play an Exploration. Get I guess we can just get any of our other lands done at this point. I don't think I'm doing anything with that mana. Let me think about this. That's there, that for the Exploration. We get 1 more land play. We can't play that Feldar Retreat no matter what, so I think I would probably just get a land done. Yuma costs 7 right now because of 1 land being in our graveyard. I guess the argument here could be you could play the Hashep Oasis and crop rotation to put this in our graveyard and get another land out, make him 6 next turn, and we could actually cast him next turn. So that actually might be the best line. Let's go for that. Play the Hashep Oasis on somebody else's turn. We pitch the Hashep Oasis and go get a land of our choice. If we're going to bother to get a land of our choice, I'd kind of like to get another desert. Or we could also go for one of our, you know, like our Triumph or one of our things that taps for everything. But let's try, I don't know, let's try Cactus Reserve. That seems fun. That would come in tapped. So now I got 2 lands in the graveyard. Yuma is costing 6 instead of 8. So this turn we'd be able to play that mountain, cast Yuma, and then we'll play this Sheffet Dunes as our 2nd land for turn. We would, what we would do is when it comes in, we'll just sacrifice this mountain to draw a card. And then main 2, we can play that Sheffet Dunes as our 2nd land for turn. And then now, in the future, whenever he attacks, we can sacrifice a desert, start drawing cards, which is pretty cool. Cool part about Cactus Preserver is we can turn it into a 8/8 because the Yuma is an 8/8 for 3 mana. So that's a pretty cool ability. We'll go 1 more turn. We'll put in this Arid Archway. Actually, wait, hold on. I think we play the Feldar Retreat first, right? Because we want to get these counters. That'd be 1, 2, 3, 4. It would be impossible to get down. I was trying to think, could we turn the Cactus Preserver online to get counters on it? But I don't think we can, at least not in the way that I want to. So we play the Arid Archway, get a counter on Yuma, play the Forest, get a counter on Yuma. We could then, could we turn it on? We played 1, 2, 3, 4. This came in tapped. We can't turn it on this turn, but that's okay. To probably make a cat with one of them, put a counter on Yuma with one of them, move to attack, sack the Arid Archway, and get ourselves one of our plants finally get them kind of starting to get them moving. We want to start making them bigger. And what I like now is with this Feldar Retreat out, we're going to start putting counters on these tokens next turn when these lands are coming in and taking real advantage of this. Here, we're just trying to draw more gas, get as many plants as we can. All we're really looking for, I think, now at this point is getting deserts from our graveyard back to our hand. And Kiri that we just draw is actually going to help us do that. It's going to buff up our plant tokens. It says at the end of our post-combat main phase, return target plant, tree folk, or land from your graveyard to your hand. So the desert we sack is just going to come back to our hand, and then that'll draw and give us another desert to put back down, and make sure we're loading up Yuma's ability. I like that play state. I think we're at a point where Feldar is going to start helping our board go pretty wide, getting counters and everything, and I think we're going to move towards a good state. So let's go into our second play. Our second playthrough here, we got five lander, which I actually looks pretty darn cool. And we draw Kiri, who we just saw in the last hand, so that's kind of cool. We have 2 deserts that come in tapped, and we have nothing to do on turn 1. Sorry, 3 that come in tapped. So I feel like that's probably one of them. We'll play that C-Note Heath. Turn 2, we see another desert, so we're getting really stacked up for getting Yuma to have things sacrificed. We'll play that. Braided buffs, and I'm sorry, it deals 1 damage target opponent. We'll just pick one both times. Turn 3, we see that Cactus Preserve we saw last game comes in tapped. But let's get the Desert of the Abominable down. Well, it has cycling. It might actually make sense to keep it in our hand so that later, if we don't want to play a land, but we want to get it, pitch it to its cycling with Yuma out, we could get a token that way, right? So I think that would make sense. Turn 4, I think we play the land and get Kiri out here. Other plants are getting buffs. Once we get Yuma out, making those tokens, they're going to get buffed up. And then at the beginning of our post-combat main phase, we can bring a land from our graveyard back to our hand, which I don't think we're going to do at the moment, but that could be a good thing for this Desert of the Indomitable, right? Eventually, once we have Yuma out, we're pitching the desert to its cycling ability to draw a card, get the token from Yuma, and then Kiri's bringing that desert back to our hand, and we can keep doing that cycle, which I really like. Here we see turn 5. I don't really have quite anything yet. We could do the mending, try to get a land into our graveyard. We could also Hour of Promise to go ahead and get 2 lands, and we will actually get the 2 zombies because we already have 3 deserts. I think I'd kind of rather do that this turn. Search your library for up to 2 lands, put them on the battlefield tapped, and then we would make the 2, we would make the 2 zombies because we already have 3. We could get another dual land in, but we don't necessarily need it. Are there any of the new deserts that look pretty cool? We have the Cactus Preserve out, otherwise that might be one I'd go for. We could always go get, what might be a good idea is getting something like Cabaret Courtyard and Broker's Hideout. What this would do is we would get the 2 lands and then get the 2 zombies because we have 3 or more deserts. And then both of these are going to go off. We sacrifice them to go get basic lands, gain 2 life, and now we have we actually have 2 more. We actually have 2 more in our graveyard to then reduce the cost of Yuma. So that's actually pretty cool because then potentially next turn maybe we can do more than one thing. 7 lands, but Yuma is going to be reduced by 2 for 2 lands in our graveyard being only 6 mana. Maybe we can play 2 things this turn. So we cast Yuma for 6 mana. And then we could play this desert, Sunscorched Desert, dealing 1 to somebody. And then we could cycle the desert to draw, get the plant warrior from Yuma, because the desert went to the graveyard. Then move to any attacks we want to do. On our main phase 2, we get the desert back from Kiri, and then set that up for next turn. So I like this play state. We're in an interesting spot. We have the Harrow. We can sack one of the deserts to ramp up some more. get another token, keep going. This is kind of where I think this deck is going to find itself as an end state a lot. Get a point where you can be putting deserts in your graveyard and getting them back, getting the token when they go in, potentially getting a token when we play them or when they come back to our hand. This is where I see this deck kind of getting to, and this is what I think what intrigues me the most. But let me know, what do you think of Yuma down in the comment section below. This is an interesting deck. I expect this deck to be very popular, and I'm actually going to be building Hizazen next week. So if you're more interested to see Hizazen, it will be coming next week, and I will catch you guys next time.